All right. I'd like to welcome everyone live from Glasgow, Scotland at the COP26 annual Global Climate Planning Summit for World Leaders and Delegates. We're at the Scottish Event Center and the surrounding campus buildings that was host to plus or minus 120 countries and their heads of state and other delegations. We're going to give you a little sampling of what it's been like here for the first few days as we begin. I'm Patrick Thibodeau. I'm Principal Sustainability Officer for JLG Architects based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm going to do a little bit of setting a perspective and my point of view, because it's really critical in terms of talking about our topic today, that we think about our point of view and where we're coming from. So I'm going to give you a bit of where I come from and my point of view and what drives the passion behind what I'm doing. And you should find your own. But I'm going to share with you what it is that it fuels what I'm doing. On the screen is a beautiful aerial view of the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness in northern Minnesota, spanning over into Canada. That is just on, that's why they call it the Boundary Waters. And one of my life themes that goes well beyond just my working career is doing what you did not know you could, what you didn't know was possible, and what some think just can't be done. And that's going to show up a lot today, and it's really part of the whole reason we're here in Scotland, is to make something happen that we didn't know we could, and some people think can't be done. I'd like to make a few special welcomes especially to the Rainbow Elementary School class in Madison, Alabama, grade 5 class led by a teacher there named on the screen. They are watching and have been keeping up with all that's been going on in Scotland during their social studies hour, which is happening right now. So we've invited them, and you'll see there's a very integrated purpose for integrating the youth and children, and it has showed up really big in Scotland as to the role that our children play and what has to happen here. And these 5th graders are particularly in a position of note, because they, by the time they finish the end of their freshman year of college, should they choose to go on to do that, they will be that class of, if I've calculated it right, the class of 2030. And that year is going to show up several times as a significant benchmark year of things that need to happen and that we're targeting for. So pay particular attention to that. And a little bit more of a welcome. My granddaughter, Natalie, is in that class. And I have 8 grandchildren. There's 3 others that are in the Madison, Alabama area. Natalie is the oldest, Sarah, Emily, and Lydia. And then there's joining us in Utah, Dylan and Brielle, and their mother is a kindergarten teacher. So there's potential. We have a kindergarten class on here. And then Matthew Ridding is a middle school teacher, and his class will be joining. So we have several of our youth and children represented across the country, and our proxy for children and youth around the world that have been heavily featured in this COP26. I want to start with the title of our presentation today, and it is Ending the Syrup Syndrome. So think about building design, and actually all activity, but in particular, we're going to focus today on building design as if the way we do it, the way we've done it, is like cooking a stack of pancakes, and the design gets all done and it's stacked up in floors just like pancakes are stacked on a plate. And then very often what was happening in the past is that the team would call in a specialist like myself or someone else, and we would pour the sustainability syrup all over the project and sweeten it up and green it up and make it good. And what we want to be doing the change in our point of view and the whole way we think is sustainability and carbon neutral and energy, zero net energy, all of those things that make great places. Those are ingredients that need to be mixed into the batter in the beginning, not poured on later. And so that's going to be a critical theme as to what we talk about today. And it's an important change in perspective. So the Paris Climate Agreement was signed by John Kerry in 2015, and we're re-entering that this year, which makes for the US this a very significant year, besides a few other things I'll share as we go. And this is a really, really big one. He has on his lap one of his granddaughters to make the point that this is something that we have to do urgently right now for our own benefit. But what we're really doing is preparing to pass this earth and all of its stewardship for the people and the planet on to the next generation, hopefully in better shape than it is currently right now, and to their children. And so we're thinking about the future, and we need you engaged. One of the things at COP is what's shown here is this tree of hope. This is in the center of what's called the Action Hub, and it's where all of the news media's central points were during the first couple of days, and there's several more that are there. But this tree has on it what's featured on the right side. On one side of the leaf is a promise that the child that made it is making of what they're going to do. And then on the other side is a request of world leaders, please do this. So in this one, this child promises to go outside more and be more active, and requesting world leaders to make more renewable energy and electric cars available. And that has been quite a topic here. So congratulations to the children for making important contributions to world policy. This wall is in the main walking area between all of the entry points and the meeting rooms, and going over to the biggest of the rooms where these 120 plus or minus world leaders, heads of state, presidents of countries gathered for 2 days this week. And they walked by this every day. 10,000 letters from 100 countries, but children and youth speaking with one voice. Please take care of this planet and leave us in better condition in various ways. Wonderful, powerful messages. And as Prince Charles was walking out of one of these meetings one day, he stopped and spent a few minutes reading these. So they didn't just walk by it. They read them, they absorbed them, and they were talked about. So to those children that are watching today, don't underestimate the power of your voice. And think about that tree of hope, or writing a letter to tell somebody what you think you're going to do and what you would like to see someone else do to join you in preparing the planet for the next generation. Now, this is the room where all of the action was happening. This place is massive. This is one of many, many rooms, but this room is where the world leaders were. You can see signs on the tables, and there's of the 120 countries that are represented, everyone has a seat at the table, and they're all treated equally. They all have the same chair, including the United States. You can see on the lower right, I'm sitting in the United States chair, and that little spot in the middle, kind of middle-ish back, you can almost see the podium. So I've got a little picture in the middle, and that's where the people would stand and talk. You can see one being featured up on the Jumbotron screens. This space is approximately the size of a football field. It is not small. And so that's where we would be. And anyone that needed to speak would speak from their table and be featured up on the screen as they're speaking when their microphone gets turned on. So I'm going to transition over to what's making this COP more special, besides the fact, and a major fact, that we are, as a country, re-entering the Paris Climate Agreement, is the United Nations issued earlier this year a once every 10 years climate report, and was titled Code Red for Humanity. things aren't looking so great, and we all have seen it. Floods and fires and weather disruptions of all kinds are increasing, and this is just a snapshot of one of many. This one is ABC News Primetime. They were featuring highlights from that report, which is 1,300 pages, very technical, but they turned it into things that we could all listen to, and you can search for that on the internet and other video news reports that give summaries. But it was big news when that report came out, and this COP is making great strides at addressing things that we need to do. And one of the great things, we have world leaders, so we have government representatives, we have non-governmental organizations like the one that I am here representing, and other faith-based organizations are showing up all over the place. So I was walking home last night down the street, and this was a very large sign that was just posted, Save Our Planet, and had a quote from the Quran, as for the earth, we spread it out and placed upon it firm mountains and caused everything to grow there in perfect balance. And that key is we need to live and take care of and have stewardship for the earth and its people in perfect balance, where we are not there right now. And we're in a condition where we need to take extraordinary measures. So that has reminded me of a quote that I recently heard it is now time that we each implement extraordinary measures, perhaps measures we have never taken before. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. And that was recently spoken to the world by Russell M. Nelson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, when he said that, he was speaking about matters of faith and spirituality. But as I have been here at COP, these words seem so incredibly applicable and important, paired with all of the other faith-based organizations that are here expressing their version and their perspective on stewardship for the earth. I think this is quite appropriate to put in the mix there. So at JLG Architects, where we're headquartered in Minneapolis, and we got 12 offices around Minnesota and the Dakotas, we have put our approach to how we're going to address this issue, represented by this diagram. Based on the value of design for life, we want to address human experience, positive performance, and prospering financially. And that is all three of the main key topics that are being addressed here. And now that's supported by designing for equitable communities and individual well-being, creating a sense of discovery and adapting, an ability to adapt for change. And one of the upcoming days here at COP will be all about adaptation to disruption that is being caused by climate change. And then under energy, today's day is actually a focus on energy. And our approach is simply, we're going to stop doing that syrup approach, what I call that, of we're going to start from where we are and make incremental little improvements. And then some future year or decade, we might get to zero at our best day. And what I found very impactful is just to flip that question around and say, well, if that's where we want to be, let's just start there. And so we start with energy, water, carbon, materials, and site ecology at a condition of being zero and put in a positive plan. And then if there are barriers in our way, we deal with those and the reality of today. And then always thinking about prospering condition for people, their communities, their organizations, and ultimately to our planet. So the aspirations we start with are represented by these few statements on the right, grouped by those three topics of human experience, positive performance, and prosper financially. We want to create awe-inspiring and thriving experiences. And what I've seen the last few days is there are a lot of people in the world that don't even come close to that. They're just struggling to survive. And while the rest of us enjoy conditions that should be shared with everybody equally, and that's one of the things that you get an awareness here when you got people from all over the world. We need to make more energy than we consume, renew the water. We only have as much as we have. And right now in the United States, we've had both floods and drought, but actually much more drought. So we need to be really concerned about our water. Build a circular economy. So we've gotten rid of the whole idea of waste. Where is away anyway when you throw it away? Where is that place? If you've never seen away, because there is a place, where does the stuff go when you throw it away? You should go see that. It's pretty nasty, and it will change how you view what you do at home when you see where that stuff goes. And then lastly, we want to clean the air and be a carbon positive, and not just carbon neutral, but carbon positive, so that we are contributing cleaner air. And these are all, they've been done. I've done them on projects and master plans all around the country. And then have positive return on investment, positive financial picture. We don't need to think about this as spending only. How much will it cost me to do these things? But there is real positive financial return. Yesterday's entire theme here at COP was all about the financing and the money that is going to be needed. And there were some really big numbers being tossed around and money committed. $100 billion a year were pledged by countries and companies, totaling $130 trillion toward paying for the effects and mitigating climate change and changing the direction of things. That is a serious lot of money, not a goal. 130 trillion has been committed, and now the rest of COP and throughout the year we'll work on how do we get that money to where it needs to go and make sure it's doing the good we want it to do. The AIA has made several statements about the urgency, the imperative need to address carbon reduction and climate change, transforming the day-to-day practice and the day-to-day lives that we live, and partnering with people to get that done. And so we're following many of those guides because what is on the screen is real. It shows the trend line of natural disasters featured in the key on the right. There's all of the different kinds. You can break that apart and study it, but what you really need to look at is the trend line. It's not sloping just a little bit up, it's going way up. So we've had a lot of increase in all kinds of natural disasters, and that is only going to go away if we mitigate the change in temperature of the earth and reduce our carbon emissions and become carbon positive. We need to clean the air. And we have to do it for a long time because this took a while to get where we are, and you can't change this graph overnight. So we have to do the right things and stay committed to them. A map of the carbon emissions per person in the world shows darker colors on this map are the higher emissions from burning fossil fuels and the kinds of things like gas in our cars and natural gas to heat our homes or whatever our homes are heated with. So the darker colors are what we don't want. We want lighter colors. And there's a lot of emissions, especially from North America and a few other countries. Orange is also not so great. So we want to be on the lower end of this scale. Looking at another measure is particulate matter. That's the fine particles floating in the air. And although there are some lighter colors on here, every country has particulate matter in the air that is above the World Health Organization recommended levels by quite a bit. So we have a lot of air pollution coming from climate change. And then this map shows the health effects. Darker colors are bad. This shows reduced life expectancy and health impacts to the quality of life because of the previous maps. And a relevant story was told that a patient goes into a hospital with a respiratory illness, their lungs, something was wrong with how they were breathing. And the doctor discovered after a while of diagnosing this patient that they had an emissions related lung problem. meaning the hospital was burning stuff and it was going up the smokestack, and they were the largest source of emissions in that community. So the doctor figured out, my hospital made this patient sick that I am now treating in the hospital that made them sick. And that story gets repeated over in many places. That hospital ended up realizing they needed to not be that, and they knocked down their high emitting energy plant and put in something clean. Looking at the effect of the pandemic, the dark colors on the top and the blue lighter colors on the bottom show what the before and after when we had to shut down for the pandemic. And so we can see, none of us wants to shut down that way again, but we did see that we can actually make a measurable and important difference by just changing how we live. And like I said, nobody wants to go back to shutdown, but if we think about what did we learn that we can keep from that period, then we don't have to go all the way back to those dark orange colors on the top, and we can be in the light blue colors on the bottom, showing much less air pollution, much less carbon emissions going. And the same thing over China. And making it a picture, we may have seen these in different places in the country. The before is what it looks like on a smoggy day. Maybe there's a temperature inversion, so everything is coming and being held in. Or do we want the clear picture on the right? I would personally much rather be breathing the air in the picture on the right. That all comes down to illnesses. So on the map, you can see the time lapse is going from 2020 through 2080. And the appearance and the expansion of areas of dark red color shows the prediction of increase of number of extreme heat days as we go through if we don't change anything. And it is significant change even between now and the next few years and up to 2030 that I mentioned earlier. Heat index increasing will lead to increased hospital emissions, will affect people with diabetes, respiratory illnesses, create nervous disorders, and ground level ozone that will irritate lungs, cause breathing difficulties, reduce lung capacity, aggravate asthma, and increase susceptibility to other things. So there are real health effects and real health costs that go with this. A recent report estimated the United States cost for all of this aggregated together is somewhere in the neighborhood of $900 billion of health cost incurred by climate change induced causes. So we have available to us, and it is being highlighted here at COP, if we just take care of our stewardship for the earth, we have the ocean, we have the trees, we have the things that grow on the land and that live in the ocean. All of that helps absorb carbon. But if we don't take care of those things, we won't have it available. So the simple things we can all do is to take care of our resources. Day 2 of COP was world leaders committing to doing things and putting money to that very end, to that very outcome. Some countries have seen significant loss of forest areas, so they're going to dedicate money to replanting and regrowing trees, and others promised to protect what we have so that we stop just cutting stuff down for no good reason and manage our resources better. So conservation and reforestation were the commitments made on day 2 by the heads of state. Bringing that all into some closure, we have a chart that shows deaths from air pollution on the left. That's the highest bar. And please note that those number of deaths, which is just about 9 million plus or minus, is greater than all of the deaths from smoking cigarettes and other forms of tobacco. And that's a big deal. So there's more people dying from air emissions and pollution related causes than are from smoking. And I put an extra black bar next to the tobacco line. It shows you all of the deaths from COVID. And the blue bars are a 10-year number. The COVID is a 2-year number. And so it's a really big deal. We have to take care of the air that we breathe. So JLG Architects has made a significant commitment to taking care of carbon for our projects. We calculate energy and energy-related carbon, and we're trying to reduce that, as well as embodied carbon, the things that get used to make the stuff that we build buildings out of, and our own JLG operations. We've signed the Architecture 2030 commitment. Notice that year 2030, our fifth graders. That year is the year that the industry has said, we're going to be carbon neutral by the time you finish your freshman year of college, should you choose to go on to college. And then that's for new buildings. And then for existing buildings, we want those all to be carbon neutral by the year 2050. So we got a lot of work to do. We're in the decade that that's all supposed to be happening. And our firm has signed that commitment. And we are making good on that by reporting every project that has an energy impact to a public disclosure website. And other firms like us have done the same thing. We've reported in the last 2 years, 300 projects totaling 15 million square feet over 28 states. So it's a lot of coverage in the country. And we've been able to see an improvement. We've moved from right around 45% to 55% energy use efficiency just in 1 year by changing what we're doing. And that's really significant. The green line at the top is our target. That's where we're trying to go. And that's the 80% reduction line on our way to net zero in the year 2030. All of that adds up to some significant outcomes, 49% reduction, depending on how you count it, 49 to 55. And that adds up to an estimated $37 million of avoided energy cost for operating buildings. That money can go be used for something else. And 176,000 tons of carbon dioxide was avoided from going up into the air. That's a 3-year number. If we project that out in terms of dollars, we get to, after 30 years, which is the life of equipment in a building, approximately, we get to over $300 million saved by building owners that can go to do some other good things. And we've even broken it out so we can track it by our various building types. And what's of note here is all of the different building types practices we have, we're seeing significant increases, but except our healthcare practice. And that's because during COVID, there really wasn't much going on. And the stuff that was being built was smaller, and we didn't have an opportunity to affect energy use in those projects. So we anticipate this coming back and being in line with the rest and even exceeding what was going on. So one of the ways we've gotten to that is by changing what we do. And we are architects. We are not engineers or scientists or any of those other things, but we got a tool that can help us predict energy use for all of our projects. And the gray pies at the bottom shows the previous years, how many projects, what percentage of projects were modeled with energy performance. And last year, we basically did every single project. So we just flipped the switch and did everything. And we went into an every project and each person approach. So what is a ton of carbon anyway, and how do we relate to it? It's really hard to understand what that is. So I converted that 176,000 tons of carbon to some things that we can relate to. So that much carbon is equivalent to a year of driving about 38,000 cars. That's a lot of carbon. Or the annual electricity use of 31,000 homes and a few other equivalencies here. And that's useful to be able to get our heads around what that ton of carbon is. Visually, this cube that's put on a soccer field is what the space that a ton of carbon takes up, 1 ton. And I said we've avoided 176,000 tons with the energy reduction that we've done to date. So imagine 176,000 of those not in the air, because of the energy efficiency and net zero designs of our projects. That's a lot. And then we're just one. If you multiply that by what everybody in the world is doing, it's not hard to imagine why we're starting to see trouble in the climate and weather patterns. This is a screen capture of one of our tools. We use CFIRA conceptual energy modeling to begin our projects, and every project does this, so we can see very quickly what our baseline, what our starting point is, and then be able to optimize conceptually to a much lower, and then it predicts the dollars of cost at the bottom, so we can convert all of that to things that building owners understand. And for our own operations, we've done it for ourselves as well as not just for our clients. So we've calculated our own internal carbon as well as the embodied carbon of the materials for the construction projects that we do. And what's on the screen here shows last year we reported 31%. This year's goal is to report and calculate all 100% of our projects. So year to date, we have calculated carbon for 163 projects, and that adds up to 590 million tons of embodied carbon. So that means when they're making the bricks and the 2x4s and the windows and the carpet and the paint and everything that goes in, those manufacturing plants use energy to make all that stuff and to mine the raw materials to make it. When you gather all that up together, that is what embodied carbon is, and that's the 590 million tons. So it's easy to see the embodied carbon in the materials is greater than the energy consumed to operate the building. And so we've year to date had a 12% reduction in this year's 100% tracking. So we started tracking it just so we would know the number. And it's amazing what tracking and measuring something will do, because we immediately started seeing a reduction compared to baseline benchmark comparisons. And then last year, we also encouraged our 160 or so employee owners to calculate their own household carbon footprint and make a choice for what they were going to do. And the reference at the bottom is that simple embodied carbon calculator that we use as a starting point. It's not super detailed, it's not technical, it takes about 15 minutes or so, plus or minus, to do. And it's a good starting point to build literacy and action on carbon emissions for our projects. We also use as a guide this document published by the Large Firm Roundtable of architecture firms in the country. And out of this, we learn that 50% of the embodied carbon in a project comes from the structure. The other 30% it comes from the enclosure or the outside of the building, and 20% from the inside finishes. So right away, we know we need to talk to our structural engineers much sooner and have a conversation about concrete, steel, or wood for structural systems, and then do a comparison using that simple calculator. And then JLG's own operation, it's fine to tell everyone else that they need to do it, but we said, well, we made this commitment and we're all in. So let's do our own carbon footprint. On the left bar shows our 2019 energy. Green is for power and heating used in our spaces, and the gray is for business travel. And you can see a reduction, which we would have expected during the pandemic. And so we got about a 25% reduction in both travel and operating costs and energy use. And then we invested in renewable energy through places in North and South Dakota. Prairie Winds and Crow Lake are local to our offices. They are energy companies that we work for, and they also create jobs and partner with the local technical education. So there's a social part of this, that it's not just the energy. We're investing in the transition and education to new green energy technology jobs that are being created because of these places. And that's what we've invested in to be a carbon neutral organization. Now we convert all of that into what is it really that we experience, and we turn those into health and wellness features that are shown. We have spatial experiences, integration of the ventilating. We make our spaces to have movement, and we think about the materials and give our occupants key views, because that tends towards health and wellness. As we do these wonderful spaces, if we do them the right way, then we can have a positive effect on things like improving reading speed and test scores, increasing productivity, healing outcomes are better in hospitals, and we feel more resilient, less absenteeism, less stress, less breathing problems. The biggest part of how we look at the indoor air, besides the materials, is what's in the products. And so we have adopted a red list chemical avoidance approach, meaning the worst of the chemicals that get used in products, we want not to be present in the things that we specify and put into construction, because the indoor air is actually in most cases worse than the outside air. And so, and we spend a lot of time indoors, so we really need to care about how that looks. So I'm going to wrap up here with a few case examples. And the first one is a project that is at an energy company. And it is one that is 2030 compliant. So this one is 74% less energy than the 2003 baseline. Our own JLG office has embedded these ideas, and we are seeking and have planned it and is pursuing. It's under construction now. We're just about to occupy it. It will be net zero energy, pursuing a LEED certification at the highest level, platinum, a living building challenge, health and wellness certification from the Centers for Disease Control called Fitwell. And then we're implementing the high performance guide of the AIA framework for design excellence. At one of the North Dakota universities, we have the Gorecki Alumni Center, and this building has done really well, saving the owner a little more than $750,000 because it's so efficient. And you can see the solar panels on the roof, and that's part of the $38,000 a year and the associated carbon that goes with that efficiency. And it's a great space. This is a Center for the Built Environment at UC Berkeley study. They have about 100,000 building occupants that have responded to their survey. So the blue squares are the benchmark buildings of similar buildings to this, and the red diamonds are the response for our building. So anything that's on the right of the blue squares is good, and they're all significantly higher than the benchmark. So this building is great for occupants, it's great for the cost of operating, and it's all around a great building, and was recently recognized as one of the top livable buildings in the country for 2020. The next example is a project in Medora, North Dakota, where Snowhetta Architects are designing the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library. And with us on the team and many others, we have an ecologist from the company called RES. They're in the Twin Cities, Minnesota area. And there's many, many people on the team, including Atelier 10, our sustainability consultant. We're all working together as a team to create this precedent-setting project. And this is what it looks like as rendered by our Snowhetta designers. And they've done a wonderful job in creating a compelling place to go and experience the Badlands of North Dakota. And inside, this is all wood structure. So what we've started with here is a low carbon project in total carbon of all sources, energy and materials. And we've made a plan that corresponds to the 4 pillars of Teddy Roosevelt's life that have been developed by the Presidential Library Foundation. And they're really applicable to what we're doing here in Scotland: to think boldly, live passionately, dare greatly, and care deeply. Basically, get in the arena and keep on going and don't give up. That's what he was all about, and that's what the library is going to feature. It's zero energy, zero carbon, zero waste, and one of the things we've done is made a whole carbon plan so that we could identify all of the sources that carbon is coming from: energy, operations, materials, and we have a complete ecological balance plan to over a 10-year span of the building. We will become carbon positive, and from that point forward through the life of the building, this site and building combined will be cleaning the air and making everything else better. One of the last examples I'll cite is Minnesota State University at Moorhead. This is an aerial view of the campus, and we just started working on the campus master plan. And the student senate recently met with the college president, and they agreed to sign a campus sustainability commitment. And the first line of it is to be a carbon neutral campus. Minnesota state law requires that. For any money that is allocated for state projects needs to come with a carbon neutral commitment for the year 2030. And finally, at COP here, I'm pleased to announce that JLG is a UN Global Compact signatory. We have adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that are published by the United Nations and agreed to by the Global Compact. We just received our JUST label from the International Living Futures Institute, which is a baseline measure of social justice topics, including a plan to make everything better, and we scored quite high. We are a longtime member of the U.S. Green Building Council, and they are actually the provider of my delegate credentials for COP. And we're members of the Living Futures Institute, and we've signed the Living Products Pledge, Living LP50, which is to get all of the materials we use in construction and those manufacturers to have products that do not have significant health effects by the year 2050 and are embodied carbon neutral. We're a research partner with the UC Berkeley Center for the Built Environment, and earlier I highlighted we're a 2030 carbon neutral commitment signatory and actively implementing that as a key mixed into the batter ingredient. So lastly, 6 words, 6 action verbs are what we really need to take out of all of this. As we equip ourselves, the organizations do this, the green words, at the 3 at the top. We equip and we embed, meaning mix it into the batter, and then empower people to act. Individuals need to do the bottom 3, engage. No one can engage for you. You have to do that part yourself. And embrace, that's also an individual thing. And then expand. After you've engaged and embraced, we want to make it permanent, and then really expand how you do it, not wait to be told what to do. So JLG Architects is significantly committed to becoming carbon neutral, and we are, and we want to stay that way, and then addressing and integrating into all of our project work carbon neutral design. So we invite you to join us in this commitment to act. One of the themes of COP is to act and accelerate, and we believe we see what's happening here as significant as an inflection point, which is a major change in direction. So we invite you to join us in this journey, and because we need everybody doing it. And I'll take any comments and questions at this point. Are there any comments or questions? I'll share just a little more with you about what's happening throughout the COP experience here in Scotland. Day 1 was overall commitments to carbon neutrality. Yesterday, day 2 was about natural resources and forestation, conservation, and replanting. Yesterday was all about money, fueling the change through financing. And for the first time in all of the 26 COPs that have occurred, we had significant private sector participation. We had the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. We had cabinet member finance ministers and secretaries committing money for countries, but the private sector and investments, insurance companies were here talking about the risks because they're paying out claims, and they're ready to invest in reducing the risks that they are seeing show up in real claims in their companies, and they want to reduce that. And so there was a lot of things talked about. Today is the energy day, and each day has a theme. You can see it on the internet posted for what they are. Next week, Thursday is the built environment day, and the day for cities, where really all the action happens is when we get boots on the ground in cities and in local neighborhoods and communities and individual projects. That's how it gets done. So we'd invite you to figure out what you can do and take action.
Patrick, we have a few questions from the YouTube live chat.
Okay.
The first one is, can you speak about the limitations and myths of limitations on sustainable energy design in architecture?
Speak about the myths. So I will just guess at what myths you might be referring to. So there's a couple of them that I hear. I'll tell a story to illustrate one that's pretty common. Quite a few years ago, in about 2008, we pursued a laboratory building, which is a very high energy use project in Southern California. And I proposed that we pursue it to try to win it so we could do the project as a net zero energy design. And I was told straight up by an engineering leader, very experienced person, Patrick, this is impossible. It cannot be done. So that's a myth. We busted that myth. We won the project. We did the project, and they are measuring. The owner has a person full-time measuring the energy performance. And it is not only net zero, but they are producing more electricity and energy than what is consumed. And so myth number one is it can't be done, or that the counting of it is somehow greenwashing or smoke and mirrors. And it can be done. And whatever hurdles we might encounter as we're doing it, we need to figure it out while we're doing it and not wait for things to be perfected. And that is probably a more pervasive point of view and thinking that I encounter, which is, well, we don't have it all figured out, so we can't do anything. And that's just not how we make progress and not how we do precedent-setting work. We have to have the courage to put out a goal and not be afraid to pursue it. Even if we don't hit it, we'll do better than if we don't do anything. This wasn't the question, but it goes to the underlying thinking behind various myths. There's a common myth of under promise and over deliver. And what under promise almost always ends up as is underperforming because of the thinking that goes into the under promising. Set a bold goal and go after it. Are there any other questions?
Yes, we have a few more. One is how you're enjoying your time at COP so far. And the second is, what is the biggest thing a regular person can do? And then there's a few more after that, but
okay. So Scotland is amazing. The people are incredibly polite. They are really aware too. There was a little shop near the place I'm staying, and I went in and bought a pizza, and I was just chatting up the shopkeeper, the one that was making the pizza. And I said, what do you know about COP? And what do you think about climate change? And I was expecting to hear the kind of stuff I usually hear in the United States, but he was very knowledgeable, and he was in favor of the COP, except for the roads being closed. He was very educated about climate change, and he knew what countries were high emitters and that Scotland was doing better than most. And I looked it up, and you know what? He was right. It was really, it took 5 minutes for the pizza to bake, and in 5 minutes, he gave me a really good 5-minute summary of everything we're talking about at COP. And I've talked to people on the street. It's very much in the recipe of their daily lives. So what do? They they dress in a way that they don't have to keep the heat cranked up in their houses. So it's a little cooler, but if you learn to dress properly, you can even 1 degree down on the heat can make a really big difference in your annual operating cost and the emissions. So now I'm going over to the what can people do. There's a lot about the life in Scotland that helps what they can do. Like 50% of the people here have 0 cars, so they just walk. They walk everywhere. They use public transit, and so if you're in an area that has good transit, then try to use that. Walk more if you can. Even 1 time of walking to something where you would have been driving, or ride a bike. Use human power whenever that's possible. When it's reasonable. There's a lot of embodied energy and embodied water in food. So I would suggest looking up that on the internet and seeing what that is, and make 1 or 2 different choices, because that's all linked together. So little choices like, do the lights really need to be on? If you're making a new space, can you live with just the daylight? Use LED lights so you're replacing the old incandescent bulbs by LED lamps, and then keep the lights off as much as you can. You don't have to be a mushroom and live in the dark, but just really think about what really needs to be on, and can we turn some stuff off? There's at least a decent percentage of energy use that comes from just leaving stuff run that doesn't need to be running.
Great. And then our final 2 questions for today. One is from a special guest. It's your granddaughter, Natalie, and she's asking what your major in college was. And then this last question is, what's the most innovative thing you're working on?
All right. So my major in college was actually architecture. So I received a Bachelor of Environmental Design, followed by a professional degree, Master of Architecture. And those are my 2 college degrees. And I was 1 class short of having a minor in business, and those business training classes paired with my profession have made a lot of difference. So I would suggest whatever your core interest is, find something else to put with it, and make some of that be business training, so that we know how business runs. Makes a really big difference.
And the last question was the most innovative thing you're working on.
Oh, most innovative. So one of them is the Teddy Roosevelt Presidential Library. We are working on that to be a completely carbon positive, clean the air kind of project. And that is a really precedent setting, first of its kind effort. We are also doing our own Grand Forks office in North Dakota, and that's a big deal because North Dakota is a really hard place to do these kinds of net zero and net carbon, carbon-free, carbon-neutral projects. And so those are quite innovative, because we're doing 4 separate certification systems on that 1 space. Recently completed was one that I worked on in a previous firm that I was with, and it just got Living Building Challenge certified. I started working on it in 2008, and it just got its full certification, and is the first renovation project in the world to receive full Living Building Challenge certification. Those are a few. But the real innovation is what I'm doing with the entire firm, and now what's happening here at COP with worldwide transformational change. That's the real innovation. Getting every person on every project to do something that moves us that direction. It used to be just we would do bright spot projects and key feature stories, but now it's become an everyone and an everything. It's an all hands on deck kind of thing, and that's a major inflection point change.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. It's been great to be here. Got a lot more going on at COP. There's still many US lawmakers here and cabinet members. So and business leaders. Tonight is a big dinner for business leaders that have come in for COP, and we'll have an opportunity to chat and do things and continue to advance what we're doing here. Thank you all for